My name is Rachel Lint, and they thought I'd disappear quietly. They thought my $1.4 million would evaporate like morning mist, along with my deactivated keycard. But a forgotten clause in a 4-year-old contract, something they never bothered to read carefully, became the blade that would slice through their gilded empire. The morning it all began felt different, though I couldn't place why. The Odyssey Solutions building gleamed under February sun, its glass panels reflecting clouds that moved too fast across the Seattle skyline. I sipped my black coffee in the 38th floor break room, watching Marshall Grant hold court near the espresso machine. Our VP of sales had that particular bounce in his step that meant someone was about to get screwed. I should have known it would be me. 8 months. That's how long I'd been cultivating the Apex Tech Industries deal. 8 months of red-eye flights, of PowerPoints refined at 3 a.m., while my daughter Maya coughed in the next room. 8 months of relationship building with their notoriously difficult procurement team, of navigating their labyrinthine approval process, of transforming their initial skepticism into genuine enthusiasm for our enterprise software suite. $20 million, that number had consumed my dreams, my waking thoughts, my every strategic calculation, not just because it would be the largest deal in Odyssey's history, but because my 7% commission would finally mean freedom. Freedom from the corporate games, from Marshall's passive-aggressive emails, from pretending I didn't notice how my ideas became his talking points in board meetings. $1.4 million. Freedom money. I returned to my desk, passing the sales floor's trophy wall where my photo from last quarter's win still hung prominently. Rachel Lint, Q4 MVP, 8.2M, in closed deals. Marshall had given that speech about how I embodied the Odyssey spirit, how I was the future of our sales organization. His smile had been wide, his handshake firm, his eyes already calculating how to redistribute my territory. The Apex Tech folder on my desk had grown thick enough to kill someone if dropped from sufficient height. I flipped through the latest contract revision, my annotations covering the margins in neat blue ink. Their legal team had finally approved our cybersecurity provisions. Their CFO had signed off on the payment terms. Tomorrow's final presentation was merely ceremonial. We'd already won. My phone buzzed. Maya's school. Ms. Lint, Maya's running a fever. Could you... I'll have someone pick her up, I said, already texting my ex-husband. Tomorrow was too important. Maya would understand when she was older, when I could afford the house with the big backyard she'd always wanted, when I could stop worrying about college funds and medical bills and all the small terrors that kept single mothers awake at night. Marshall appeared at my cubicle's entrance, his cologne announcing him before his voice did. Rachel, my superstar, how's our baby looking? Our baby. I forced a smile. Final presentation tomorrow at 10. They're ready to sign. Beautiful, beautiful. He drummed his fingers on my cubicle wall, a nervous habit I'd learned to fear. Actually, quick favor. Could you forward me all your Apex Tech correspondence? Legal wants to do a final review. I copied you on everything already. Right, of course, but maybe forward it again. You know how my inbox gets. His laugh was hollow, rehearsed. Oh, and I'll need your Salesforce login. It's doing some security audit. The coffee in my stomach turned acidic. Security audit. Random checks. You know how it is. He was already walking away. Fantastic work on this. Rachel, you're a real team player. I spent that evening in my home office, Maya sleeping fitfully in the room next door. Her fever finally broken. The Apex Tech presentation glowed on my laptop screen, 73 slides of perfection. I'd memorized every transition, every talking point, every potential objection and its corresponding rebuttal. My phone lit up with a text from Jennifer, one of the junior sales reps. Heads up, saw HR booking the small conference room for tomorrow morning. Marshall plus legal will be there. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I opened my laptop again and began forwarding documents, not to Marshall, to my personal email, every contract draft, every written promise and handshake deal. 4 years of work, compressed into a Gmail folder labeled insurance. Sleep came in fragments, broken by Maya's coughing and dreams where I stood in empty conference rooms, presenting to chairs that swiveled away when I spoke. Morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds that hadn't been forecasted, I dressed carefully, my best suit. The Hermes scarf Marshall had gifted the team after we'd hit Q3 targets. The watch my father had given me when I'd graduated business school. Armor for a battle I could feel approaching but couldn't quite see. Maya hugged me at the door, still warm with residual fever. "Knock 'em dead, Mom." "Always do, baby." The drive to Odyssey felt longer than usual. NPR droned about market volatility, about tech layoffs, about the importance of reading the fine print. I parked in my usual spot, noting how few cars occupied the executive level. Either everyone was late, or everyone knew something I didn't. The elevator ride to 38 took forever. Each floor dinged past like a countdown. When the doors opened, the sales floor was unusually quiet. Heads turned toward me, then quickly away. Laptop screens minimized. Conversations died mid-sentence. My keycard worked on the main door. Small mercy. Jennifer caught my eye from across the room, her face pale. She mouthed a single word, "Run." But I was Rachel Lint. I didn't run. I closed million-dollar deals while my world burned down around me. I walked to my desk with measured steps, noting the absence of my personal items, my coffee mug, the framed photo of Maya, the small succulent I'd nursed through 3 Seattle winters. All gone. Marshall's assistant materialized at my elbow. "Rachel, they're ready for you in conference room C. The Apex Tech presentation isn't until 10. This won't take long." Conference room C was the smallest meeting room on our floor, typically reserved for firing contractors and delivering bad news to clients. Marshall sat at the narrow table's head, flanked by Deborah from HR and someone I didn't recognize, young. Sharp suit, definitely legal. "Rachel, please sit." Deborah's voice had that practiced neutrality that meant someone had rehearsed this conversation. I remained standing. "I have a client presentation in 90 minutes. About that, Marshall couldn't meet my eyes. He focused on his hands, on his phone, on the abstract art print that someone had thought would make this soulless room feel human. "We've had to make some difficult decisions." Decisions. "The board's mandated a restructuring. We're eliminating several positions, including yours." Deborah slid a folder across the table. "Effective immediately." The words hung in recycled air. Somewhere in the building, a printer whirred. Someone laughed in the break room. The world continued its rotation, indifferent to the fact that mine had just stopped. "The Apex Tech deal closes tomorrow." "We're aware." Marshall finally looked at me, and I saw something worse than guilt in his eyes. I saw planning. "Brad will handle the transition." Brad who couldn't close a door, much less a $20 million enterprise deal. Brad who'd asked me just last week how to format a revenue projection. My commission. Per your employment agreement, commissions are only paid on deals closed during active employment. The legal stranger spoke with practiced precision. "Since you're no longer with the company as of this morning, you won't be eligible for commission on any pending deals." $1.4 million. The number flashed neon in my mind. Maya's college fund, the house with the backyard, the freedom to breathe. "You're firing me the day before my biggest deal closes." "The timing is unfortunate," Deborah conceded, "but these decisions are based on broader organizational needs." I laughed, actually laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Unfortunate, right." Marshall shifted in his chair. "We're offering a generous severance package, 2 weeks' pay, plus 2 weeks. I looked at each of them in turn, memorizing their faces. "For 4 years of exceeded quotas, for building half your enterprise portfolio, for Apex Tech. We appreciate everything you've done for Odyssey." Deborah read from her script. "We're happy to provide a positive reference for your future endeavors." The legal stranger pushed another document forward. "We'll need you to sign this separation agreement. Standard stuff, non-disparagement, return of company property, acknowledgement of terms." I didn't touch the paper. "I'll need time to review this with my attorney." "Of course, though we'd appreciate a quick turnaround. For everyone's sake." Marshall stood, eager to end this performance. "Security will escort you to gather any personal items." "That won't be necessary." I smiled with all my teeth. "Looks like someone already packed for me." The walk across the sales floor felt endless. Every step echoed. Former colleagues became suddenly fascinated by their screens. The trophy wall still displayed my photo, though someone would remove it before lunch, probably Brad, eager to claim his new territory. Security waited by the elevator Tom, who I'd shared cigarettes with during late-night deal negotiations, who knew my coffee order and my daughter's name. His face was apologetic but professional. "Ms. Lint?" "Tom." We rode down in silence. 38 floors of descent, each one stripping away another piece of the identity I'd built. Senior sales director, top producer, Marshall's superstar. By the time we reached the lobby, I was just another terminated employee with a banker's box of nothing. "I'm sorry," Tom said quietly as we reached the parking garage. "This ain't right." "No," I agreed. "It's not." He handed me the box empty except for a blue folder I didn't recognize. I waited until I was in my car to open it. Inside, yellowed with age, was my original employment agreement from 4 years ago, the one I'd signed when Odyssey was still a startup, when promises meant something, when Marshall had sold me on being part of something revolutionary. I almost threw it in the back seat. Then a phrase caught my eye, buried deep in Section 7 Terms and Conditions. My hands stilled. I read it again, then once more, to be sure I understood. My phone rang Apex Tech's procurement director. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her confused message about my absence from our prep call. She mentioned something else, almost in passing, something about contract stipulations, something about key personnel. I drove home slowly, my mind racing faster than Seattle traffic would allow. Maya was at school, the house empty except for possibilities. I spread the employment agreement across my kitchen table, found my reading glasses, and began the kind of careful review I should have done 4 years ago. Section 7.3.2, Client Relationship Protection. In the event of involuntary termination of sales personnel directly responsible for client relationships valued at over $10 million, the company must provide written notice to affected clients no less than 30 days prior to termination. Failure to provide such notice grants the client full discretion to void any pending contracts without penalty. I read it 5 times. Then I pulled up the Apex Tech contract on my personal laptop, the one I'd reviewed obsessively for 8 months. There, in their terms and conditions, was its mirror clause. This agreement is contingent upon continuous involvement of key personnel as identified in Appendix J. Any change in said personnel without prior written consent from Apex Tech Industries grants Apex Tech the right to terminate this agreement without penalty or obligation. Appendix J contained exactly one name: Rachel Lint, Senior Sales Director, Odyssey Solutions. I sat back in my kitchen chair, staring at the water stain on my ceiling that I'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. Outside, Seattle drizzle began its afternoon symphony. Inside, a plan began forming with crystalline clarity. They'd fired me to steal my commission, but in their greed, they'd forgotten to read their own contracts. More importantly, they'd forgotten that I'd helped write Apex Techs. I opened my laptop and began typing. Dear Procurement Team, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to inform you that as of this morning, I am no longer employed by Odyssey Solutions. This was not a planned transition, and I was not given the opportunity to ensure a smooth handover of your account. Per our discussions over the past 8 months, I know how much Apex Tech values consistency and transparency in your vendor relationships. I want to ensure you have all the information needed to make the best decision for your organization moving forward. If you have any questions about the transition, I'd recommend directing them to Odyssey's legal department, as I'm no longer authorized to speak on their behalf. It has been an absolute pleasure working with you and your team. Warm regards, Rachel Lint. I hesitated over the send button for exactly 3 seconds, then clicked. The response came within minutes, not from procurement, from Apex Tech's chief legal officer. Rachel, this is concerning. Can you take a call? I did. The conversation was brief, professional, and devastating in its implications. Apex Tech's legal team had built their own protections into the contract, having been burned before by vendor instability. The key personnel clause wasn't window dressing. It was a cornerstone of their risk mitigation strategy. To be clear, their CLO said, Odyssey didn't notify us of this change. I learned about it 90 minutes ago. and you're no longer authorized to implement the solutions we've spent 8 months customizing for our infrastructure. Correct. A long pause. We'll need to review our options. In the meantime, please retain any relevant documentation. Of course. And Rachel, we're very sorry to hear about this. You've been nothing but professional throughout this entire process. The call ended. I sat in my quiet kitchen, listening to the rain intensify. Somewhere across town, Marshall was probably coaching Brad through my presentation. Somewhere, Deborah was filing my termination paperwork. Somewhere, that young lawyer was billing hours for a job well done. None of them had any idea what was coming. My phone exploded 2 hours later. Marshall's call came first, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Rachel, what did you do? I informed our client of a material change in their account management, as required by professional courtesy. You had no right. Actually, I had an obligation. Transparency. Right? Isn't that one of Odyssey's core values? Apex Tech's legal team is threatening to void the contract. How unfortunate. Rachel, listen to me very carefully. You're playing a dangerous game here. We can make things very difficult for you. More difficult than stealing my commission, more difficult than firing me to avoid paying what I earned. You need to fix this. I'm no longer an Odyssey employee. Remember, I have no standing to fix anything. We could discuss a consulting arrangement, temporary, just to smooth the transition. I looked at the rain-streaked window, at the distorted world beyond. Send me a proposal. I'll have my attorney review it. Your attorney. The one reviewing my separation agreement. The one very interested in Section 7.3.2 of my original employment contract. Silence. Then, what do you want? Right now, I want to pick up my daughter from school. We can discuss what I want tomorrow, after you've had time to fully appreciate your situation. I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Deborah from HR. I let it go to voicemail, then legal, then Brad, of all people, probably wondering how to salvage a deal he couldn't begin to understand. The school pickup line moved slowly, giving me time to think. Maya bounced into the car, fever fully broken, chattering about her day. I listened with half an ear, the other half composing my next moves. Odyssey had made a $20 million mistake. The question was, how much would they pay to fix it? Mom, you're smiling weird. Am I? Like when you beat me at Monopoly. Maybe I just had a good day at work. Did you close the big deal? I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, my brilliant, perceptive daughter who deserved better than a mother who missed school plays for sales calls. Not yet, baby, but I'm about to. That evening, while Maya did homework, I researched. Not just Washington state employment law, though that proved illuminating, but Odyssey Solutions' recent SEC filings. Their Q1 guidance assumed the Apex Tech deal. They'd already whispered numbers to analysts. Marshall had probably already calculated his bonus based on his team's big win. $20 million. Without it, they'd miss earnings. The stock would tumble. The board would demand answers. All because they'd gotten greedy over $1.4 million. My attorney hired that afternoon with the last of my savings called it deliciously ironic. She'd reviewed both contracts, my employment agreement, and the termination paperwork I'd wisely refused to sign. They're exposed 6 ways from Sunday, she said. The question is, what's your desired outcome? I knew what Marshall expected. He thought I'd negotiate for my commission, maybe a bit extra for the inconvenience. He thought I was the same eager-to-please team player who'd built his empire one deal at a time. He had no idea who I'd become in the space between "you're fired" and "fix this." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Odyssey's legal team reached out with a generous consulting offer 3 months at my previous salary to help transition the Apex Tech account. No mention of the commission, no acknowledgement of their breach. I responded with my own terms. Full $1.4 million commission for the Apex Tech deal. 6 months additional severance. Removal of all non-compete clauses. A written apology from Marshall Grant. My attorney thought the last item was petty. She was right. I didn't care. Their response was predictable outrage, threats, reminders of my obligations to the company. I forwarded their emails to Apex Tech's legal team, just to keep everyone informed. Transparency, after all. By Thursday, Apex Tech had formally notified Odyssey of their intent to terminate the contract. The sales floor, according to Jennifer's furtive texts, had descended into chaos. Brad had tried to salvage the relationship with a desperate presentation that only highlighted how little he understood their needs. Marshall had personally flown to Apex Tech's headquarters, only to be politely refused at reception. I spent Thursday afternoon at the park with Maya, pushing her on the swings, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed constantly, calls I didn't answer, emails I didn't read. The world could wait. That evening, a different number called, one I recognized, Richard Fleming, Odyssey's CEO, the man who'd hired Marshall, the man who'd built the company from a garage startup to a publicly traded corporation. "Rachel," he said without preamble, "we need to talk." "I'm listening." "This Apex Tech situation, it's problematic." "For Odyssey, certainly." "For everyone. You think Apex Tech will trust a sales director who torpedoed a deal over personal grievances?" "I didn't torpedo anything. I followed the notification requirements that Odyssey ignored. If anyone destroyed this deal, it was whoever decided to fire me without reading the contracts." A long pause. "Marshall made a mistake." "Several, actually. What would it take to resolve this?" I looked at Maya, curled on the couch with a book, at the small apartment that had sheltered us through 4 years of grinding pursuit of other people's dreams, at the blue folder that contained the proof of how little my dedication had mattered to them. My commission, full severance package, and Marshall's resignation. "You can't be serious. Check your stock price tomorrow when news of the failed deal breaks. Then tell me if I'm serious." Marshall's been with the company for 6 years. And in those 6 years, how many top performers has he driven out? How many commissions has he clawed back? How many deals has he claimed credit for? I'd done my research. The Glassdoor reviews painted a clear picture. I'm offering you an opportunity to solve multiple problems at once. I'll need to discuss this with the board. You have until market open tomorrow. After that, I'll be exploring other options." "What other options?" "Did you know 3 of your largest competitors have reached out since Tuesday, apparently? News travels fast in our industry." Another pause. "We'll be in touch." Friday dawned clear and cold. One of those Seattle mornings where Mount Rainier stands in sharp relief against crystalline sky. I dressed carefully, not for Odyssey, but for my lunch meeting with the CEO of Velocity Systems. They'd been courting me for years. Maybe it was time to listen. The call from Fleming came at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes before market open. "The board has agreed to your terms," he said without emotion. "Full commission, 6 months severance, and Marshall has decided to pursue other opportunities. In writing, today, our legal team will have documents to you by noon. And the apology, that won't be forthcoming. Marshall's no longer in a position to speak for Odyssey." "Good enough. Once I've reviewed and signed the settlement, I'll reach out to Apex Tech about potential paths forward. You'll help recover the deal. I'll have a conversation. What happens next depends entirely on how that conversation goes." The documents arrived at 11:58 a.m. My attorney reviewed them, suggested minor changes that were immediately accepted. By 2 p.m., I was $1.4 million richer, at least on paper, and officially unemployed. I called Apex Tech's CLO. "Rachel," she said warmly, "I heard there have been some changes at Odyssey." "There have. I wanted to discuss potential paths forward for your implementation." "We've been discussing that internally. Can I be frank?" "Please. We're tired of vendor instability. We spent 8 months working with you specifically because you understood our needs. Now, Odyssey thinks they can swap in someone who doesn't know our infrastructure, our culture, our requirements." "I understand your frustration. Here's what I'm thinking. Would you be open to continuing the implementation as an independent consultant? We'd contract directly with you, bypass Odyssey entirely." I smiled at my reflection in the kitchen window. I'd need to review the specifics, but I'm certainly open to discussion. "Excellent. And Rachel, we're prepared to make it worth your while. This project is too important to trust to anyone else." The contract arrived Monday morning, not just for the implementation, for ongoing support, future projects, a relationship that extended far beyond what Odyssey had offered. The terms were generous, more than generous. I signed it from my new home office, in the house with the big backyard that Maya had already claimed for soccer practice. Tuesday's tech news included a small item about Odyssey Solutions missing Q1 projections due to unexpected contract adjustments. Their stock dropped 12%. Marshall Grant's LinkedIn showed him seeking new opportunities. Brad had already updated his profile to former sales representative. I didn't gloat much. 3 months later, I registered Clarity Nexus LLC, just a simple consulting firm, nothing that would threaten Odyssey's market share, except former clients had a funny way of finding me, especially the ones who'd worked with Marshall, especially the ones tired of having their key relationships treated as expendable. Jennifer joined me first, bringing 2 major accounts, then David from Enterprise Sales, then Catherine from Solutions Architecture. Each one had a similar story: promised commissions that disappeared, credit stolen, relationships discarded the moment they became inconvenient. We built something different, something better. Contracts that protected both parties, commission structures that rewarded actual performance, a culture that valued the people who did the work, not just those who claimed credit for it. Apex Tech became our flagship client, their logo prominent on our website. Their testimonial was brief but powerful. Clarity Nexus understands that business is built on relationships, not just contracts. They've never let us down. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the history. A year later, Odyssey Solutions announced a strategic restructuring. Revenue had plateaued. Key accounts had departed. The board brought in new leadership, people who promised to return to the company's roots, people who used words like accountability and transparency without irony. I got a call from Fleming on a rainy Tuesday, almost exactly a year after that morning in Conference Room C. "Rachel," he said, sounding older, tired. I wanted to apologize. Not officially, personally. "That's not necessary." "It is. We built something good once. Then we let people like Marshall convince us that squeezing every penny was more important than honoring our commitments." "It happens. Would you ever consider coming back your terms?" "Of course." I looked around my office, my real office, with windows that opened, and plants that thrived, and a picture of Maya in her soccer uniform. My calendar showed meetings with 3 Fortune 500 companies, all seeking the kind of partnership Odyssey had thrown away. "I appreciate the offer," I said gently, "but I'm building something here." "I understand, for what it's worth. You were right, about everything." "I know." After we hung up, I walked to the window, watching Seattle's eternal rain wash the city clean. My phone showed a bank balance that still sometimes took my breath away. My calendar showed dinner with Maya. No conflicts, no last-minute client emergencies that couldn't wait. Freedom, it turned out, came in many forms. Sometimes it was a 7-figure bank account. Sometimes it was the ability to walk away from people who didn't value you. Sometimes it was building something better from the ashes of other people's greed. But mostly, it was knowing that when someone tried to steal what you'd earned, you had the power to make them regret it, not through revenge or rage or public humiliation, simply by reading the fine print they'd ignored, by holding them to their own contracts, by refusing to disappear quietly into corporate obscurity. They'd thought I would slink away, grateful for 2 weeks severance and a neutral reference. They'd thought $1.4 million could vanish as easily as a deleted Salesforce record. They'd thought wrong. The rain intensified, and I smiled, remembering Marshall's face when he'd realized what that forgotten clause would cost him. Everything. It had cost him everything. Just as it should. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "Mom, can we get pizza tonight? I aced my math test." "Absolutely, baby. Anywhere you want." Because that's what freedom really meant. Not just the money, though that certainly helped. Not just the business, though building Clarity Nexus filled me with pride. Freedom meant being there for the moments that mattered. It meant never again choosing between my daughter's fever and a client presentation. It meant knowing my worth and refusing to let anyone steal it. The Apex Tech deal had closed eventually with Clarity Nexus, not Odyssey Solutions. The commission had been paid in full, plus the consulting fees, plus the ongoing partnership that had blossomed from mutual respect instead of corporate exploitation. $1.4 million. Freedom money. They'd tried to steal it. Instead, they'd handed me the keys to something far more valuable, the knowledge that sometimes, The best revenge isn't loud or dramatic or violent. Sometimes it's as quiet as an email to a client, as subtle as a forgotten clause, as devastating as holding people accountable to their own words. Marshall Grant had taught me that final lesson, though I doubt he'd meant to. In trying to steal my success, he'd shown me exactly how powerful I could be, how precise, how ruthlessly effective when pushed too far. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to Conference Room C, to blue folders and forgotten clauses, to greed that blinds and karma that clarifies. Then I got back to work. Real work, the kind that builds instead of destroys, the kind that honors promises instead of breaking them, the kind that ensures no one would ever again make the mistake of thinking Rachel Lynch would disappear quietly. Not when they owed her $1.4 million. Not when they'd forgotten to read the fine print. Not when she'd learned finally, completely, irrevocably, her own worth. The rain continued its Seattle symphony, and I listened with satisfaction, planning the future from an office where no one could fire me, where every deal closed meant security for my daughter, where success tasted like vindication served at exactly the right temperature. Cold, precise, and absolutely, undeniably earned. Welcome to Clarity Nexus. We read the contracts, all of them, especially the parts you forgot existed.